43 fighters were on the floor. Some were armored, others were massive, chitinous nightmares from the outer rim, but all of them were curled into fetal positions or covering their auditory organs. In the center of the glass-floored pit, Daria sat with her legs tucked, cradling the small, auburn-haired child against her chest. She was singing. It was a soft, steady melody that seemed to pull the very air out of the room, turning the high-stakes arena into a nursery. Little Mika was fast asleep, her thumb hooked into the hem of her mother's laundry uniform. Adjudicator Fenthis stared at the audio frequency log on his console, his compound eyes freezing as the scrolling data confirmed the impossible. How could a single human voice do this? If you want to see how one mother's voice brought a galactic empire to its knees, stay with us as we uncover the biological secret the Meraxi never saw coming. 6 hours earlier, the arena roster had dismissed her as entertainment filler. The entry for Daria Vasilieva read, "Unarmed civilian, no combat training, threat level, negligible." Beneath it, a cruel hand had added a final note, "Has infant." Crowd appeal. The transition from the station laundry to the cold glass of the Meraxi exhibition arena had been a blur of industrial chemical smells and the screech of atmospheric breach alarms. Daria still had the chapped, red hands of a woman who spent 14 hours a day in the wash cycles. But as she stood in the holding pen, she wasn't looking for a weapon. She was checking Mika's fabric star toy, carefully tucking in a loose thread where one point had begun to unravel. It was a small, hand-stitched thing, filled with synthetic batting and the scent of home. The Meraxi thrived on the spectacle of fear. They expected the human to beg, to run, or to provide a frantic, emotional contrast to the professional killers stalking the perimeter. Instead, when the heavy gates hissed open, Daria assessed the environment with a clinical, quiet intensity. She saw the glass floor, a massive acoustic diaphragm suspended over a sensory void. She saw the curved walls designed to bounce every scream back at the source. She didn't scream. Daria sat down in the exact center of the pit. She pulled Mika onto her lap, shielding the child's eyes from the flickering stadium lights, and began to hum. It was a low, resonant vibration that started in her chest and spilled out into the Russian lyrics of a provincial lullaby. Bayu Bayushki Bayu. Fenthis, watching from the observation tier, logged it as a pre-trauma coping response. He expected it to break the moment the first fighter crossed the glass. But as the first challenger, a four-armed crawl with a serrated blade, approached, the data on Fenthis's screen began to spike. Daria's vocal frequency hit 528 Hz and held there with a terrifying, crystalline precision. The glass floor beneath her began to act as a massive amplifier, catching the harmonic overtones and pulsing them back into the arena. The crawl fighter didn't strike. It slowed. Its primary antennae, usually stiff with aggression, began to droop in a rhythmic, involuntary sag. Does the sound of a lullaby feel like a weapon to you, or something else entirely? Fenthis pulled a deep acoustic scan, his heart sacs fluttering. The entire arena was vibrating at a frequency that shouldn't have been possible for a non-augmented biological entity. He watched as the crawl's blade clattered to the floor, the fighter's movements turning sluggish, almost drunken. Human vocal cords, he realized, were not just for speech. They were precision instruments evolved over 200,000 years to perform a single, devastatingly effective task: biological override. Fenthis watched the readout for the 43rd combatant, a massive armor-plated Ursid, as it slumped against the reinforced glass. His breathing had slowed to a rhythmic crawl. The data was undeniable. Daria's lullaby was operating as a bioacoustic suppression field, specifically tuned to the 200 to 500 Hz range. Human evolution had perfected this. For millennia, mothers had used these exact frequencies to lower cortisol and spike oxytocin in their young. But on the Meraxi stage, the glass floor acted as a perfect conductor, vibrating the chitin and bone of every alien species in the room. It was a biological override. The human wasn't fighting. She was creating a zone of absolute safety where violence simply couldn't exist. Warden Cullis's voice crackled over the arena intercom, distorted and harsh. "Cease the noise, human. Stand and face the adjudication." Daria didn't flinch. She didn't even stop the melody, weaving her response into the rhythmic pulse of the song. Her eyes remained fixed on her daughter's sleeping face. "She hasn't finished her nap yet," Daria said. Her voice, even when speaking, carried that same resonant hum. Cullis went silent. On the observation deck, 3 of the warden's most decorated security officers had slowly sat down on the floor, their heads lolling against the cold metal bulkheads as the recording of the lullaby continued to loop through the stadium speakers. Grand Arbiter Salak finally stood, his amber eyes clouded with a rare, shimmering hesitation. He didn't order an execution. He didn't send in more droids. He simply gestured for the gates to be opened. "Evacuate the sector," Salak commanded, his voice a whisper, "before we all forget why we are here." The return to the quiet halls of the station was a ghost-like procession. Daria walked through the open gates, Mika still heavy and warm in her arms. She didn't look back at the 43 warriors she had brought to their knees without ever raising a fist. Fenthis remained at his console long after the lights dimmed. He stared at the empty pit, at the glass that still seemed to thrum with a ghostly residual heat. In the center of the floor, forgotten in the haste of the exit, lay the fabric star toy. It was just a bit of cloth and thread, one point still unraveling, catching the light of the dying emergency strobes. It was the only evidence left that a laundry worker had once turned a slaughterhouse into a sanctuary. Fenthis closed the file, his fingers trembling. He knew he would never be able to listen to silence the same way again. How far would you go to protect what you love? If the story moved you, come back tomorrow as we explore the terrifying strength of the human heart.